Now we'll call the meeting to order since they started the. First item on the agenda is the roll call. So if the clerk would like to do the roll call.
Absolutely. Jeff Sims, Michelle Jenkins, I believe they are excused today. Mike Williams.
Here.
Brian McCarthy.
Here.
Jonathan Scott. I'm sorry, is Melanie Calloway there?
Yes, Melanie Calloway.
Thank you. Brian Pissarro.
Here.
Michael English. Cal Hardy. Robert Fry. Anna Quinones. Clay Hollis. Gina Evans.
Here.
Leland Dykes. Marcelo Tavernari. Chris Dianantis.
Here.
Mark Hudson.
Here.
Danny Jorgensen. Margaret Kubalins. Jay Collins.
Present.
Melissa Leinhardt.
Here.
Nicole Sutton.
Here.
Sarah Caper.
Here.
We do have an in-person quorum. Let me take a look and see if there's anybody online virtually. I think we are good. If anybody does show up online, Chair, I will ask for a consent vote for remote participation.
All right, thank you. First item on the agenda is public comment. I don't see anybody in the room, but is there anybody online for public comment?
Let me take a look. I don't see any hands raised and I don't see any questions, so we're good there.
All right, thank you. So hearing none, move to the next item. Next item is approval of the minutes. As soon as everybody reviewed the minutes, or does anybody have any questions about the minutes? Seeing none, is there a motion? Motion to approve. I have a motion to approve from Melanie.
Jay Collins, second.
Second from Jay. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, motion is unanimous. The action items, the first one is a TIP update. And I believe Johnny is online. Yep, I can see him now. Is online to present for the TIP amendment.
Yeah, I'm here. Thanks, Mike. Johnny Wong, TPO staff, and I'm the TIP program manager. Greg, would you mind making me the presenter? All right, cool. Thank you. Let me just make sure you all can see my screen.
You're in a person. There you go.
All right, perfect. All right, so good afternoon, TAC. Once again, I'm here to update you with the Transportation Improvement Program, the TIP. This year's update goes through fiscal years 22-23, all the way out 5 years to 26-27. I'm actually going to skip through some of the information, or at least abbreviate it, because we've given you this presentation in years past. I only prepared 3 slides with information to help you kind of decode and understand what the TIP document is, and basically spelling out the way to, or the appropriate way to read through the priority tables. So you all know that the TIP is composed of 3 tables. The first is a list of projects that have already been prioritized. They've been evaluated and ranked based on the anticipated benefit to the community in one of our 5 program areas. What's special about Table 1 is that it's a priority that has received some construction funding, so at least one phase of it is programmed for construction within the next 5 years, and projects remain on Table 1 until they're totally completed. The reason why we leave them on is because that shows that the community still supports that project getting completed. Table 2 is probably the table that you all will want to pay most attention to. It's the one that takes the longest to prepare. This is a list of projects that are trying to become priorities. They've been submitted to us by the local governments and some of our partner agencies. We've evaluated them and ranked them based on their anticipated benefit, and we're trying to find ways to fund these projects until they move off the priority list. They'll stay there. So that's the table that takes the longest for us to compose and the one that we'll be spending most of our time discussing today. The last table serves as pretty much a catch-all for all other projects that are funded within the next 5 years. The bulk of the projects that are listed in Table 3 come out of the DOT work program. We also supplement that with the local government capital improvements programs. So we're not required to do that, but we include projects from the county, the 3 cities, T-BARTA, THEA, so on, because we want to make sure that there's planning consistency, and it's kind of like a one-stop shop for members of the public to go look up what transportation projects are moving forward in the next 5 years. But what's special about Table 3 is that the TPO doesn't have any discretion over any of those projects. So, because they're funded with local dollars, we can't really have an impact on anything that's in Table 3. The process for how we compose Table 2 is we solicit projects from our jurisdictions toward the very beginning of the calendar year, sometime like January, February, usually no later than that. We meet with the jurisdictions, they give us a list of priorities. We take those priorities and categorize them into one of our 5 investment categories that are shown on the right side of the screen: infrastructure, safety, reliability, multimodal or major projects. We then go out and try to find the most appropriate data set to rank all of those projects. And then once we have that rank, we compile them into a table, and we work with both our partners and our in-house grants coordinator to identify a grant source that we might be able to apply for to try to find funds to move that project forward. So that kind of brings us to one of the biggest updates for this year. With the new infrastructure bill that was adopted earlier in the year, there are a ton of new grant opportunities that we're looking into. Unfortunately, most of them haven't offered a ton of detail other than we know that NOFO is coming, or a notice of funding opportunity. Our grants coordinator is tracking that internally, but just for now, we identified some funding sources based on like a brainstorming session. We believe that some of these projects might be eligible for these funds, but we don't know for sure until the details are released. So some new funding codes that appear this year that haven't shown up in years past are Carbon Reduction Federal Fund, CRFF. That's a new one that guarantees money coming into this region on the order of about $2.5 million. Some of the projects that might be eligible for that funding are anything that supports climate change resilience, wildfire resilience, drought, extreme heat, flooding. The federal government wants us to consider environmental justice, and the reason why we think a lot of our projects might be eligible are that there's a requirement that they demonstrate a reduction in transportation emissions. So obviously you might think of anything that reduces congestion or improves reliability might be eligible. Some others are PROTECT. That's a really long acronym, promoting operations for transformative, efficient, and cost savings transportations. I'm not the expert on that, but again, we do have in-house grants coordinator that's helping get that funding. We're putting together a Safe Streets for All collaborative grant. I believe we're already working on that. Some of the others that might have an impact on projects listed in our Table 2 are MEGA. MEGA requires us to demonstrate that there's cross-jurisdictional coordination, and it's really intended to fund big projects that, in the absence of receiving that grant funding, might not be able to be paid for. So we're really looking at that as a funding source for a lot of our major projects that are listed in Table 2. I'll kind of go forward. I'm not going to read them all off to you, but if you see anything in the tables and you have questions about it, just raise your hand and I'll do my best to answer. All right, so we can get into it. The highlights from Table 1. We had a ton of new projects that we completed this year. I'll go down the list and read off some that construction was completed. Bush Boulevard resurfacing project from Armenia to Florida. Downtown Advanced Traffic Management System project. Armenia Ave to Bush Boulevard. I think that's a safety project. East Hillsborough Ave from Central to 56th. Columbus from Nebraska to 14th. 46th from Bush Boulevard to Fowler. Hillsborough from Memorial Sheldon to Church. Green Spine Phase 3A. I think that's 3A. I don't have my glasses on, so forgive me. Dale Mabry from Sly to Van Dyke. US 301 from Falkenberg to Sly. Lutz Lake Fern Trail Connector, and Columbus from Rome to North Boulevard. We added a lot of projects to Table 1 this year because DOT was able to find funding for quite a few. Green Spine Phase 2B, Dale Mabry from Mango to Pearl is a safety project. Fowler from I-275 to I-75. I believe that project has some design and construction. That's a safety project. Twigs from Ashley to Nebraska. US 41 Nebraska from Kennedy to Bears. US 92 Hillsborough from Veterans to I-275. Spruce from Airport Service Road to Dale Mabry. All three of those that I just read off are TSMO projects, or Transportation Systems Management and Operations. Basically, they're reliability projects that involve some technology. Adamo Drive at 26th Street intersection, Alexander Street and James L. Redmond Parkway intersection improvement out in Plant City. Selman Greenway Trailhead from 17th to 19th. Cross Bay Ferry operations. They got Hart won some money to purchase a ferry for that project. And then, of course, you all are familiar with the TIP amendments that passed late last year for the West Shore interchange, downtown interchange, and then a segment of I-275 from MLK to Hillsborough. All right, there were a lot of changes to Table 2 this year, a lot of additions. I want to quickly spend some time on how to read through Table 2, and I'm pulling a screenshot from one of the pages on this slide to indicate that there are really three things that should be paid attention to, aside from just the projects in which order they fall in. First is the project status request. We tried to clean up this column in the table quite a bit. In previous years, it has just been almost like a notes or a comment section. There was a lot of superfluous information in there. We tried to clean that up quite a bit and highlight anything in red that's outstanding. So as you make your way through the list, you'll see phases that are requesting funding, the amount. If we're recommending funding for any of the projects, it'll be highlighted in red. And then other things like if there's additional coordination required to move the project forward, we noted it in that column. The second circle that you see on this slide says suggested funding type. Again, I highlighted that because there are a lot of new funding sources out there. So we want you all to pay attention to that info and bring it back to your agencies and your local governments. Keep an eye on that because those are the sources that we may be going after to move your projects forward in future years. And then furthest to the right is a new column that says no return. What that kind of indicates is if these projects are adopted into the TIP this year, the money that's allocated to the project would be set aside for a design phase or a later stage of the project. And that's significant because according to state statute, once a project advances to the design phase of preliminary engineering, it can only be removed by joint action of the TPO board and FDOT. That's probably more information than any of you really need, but it's pertinent because there have been some committee actions to remove projects from the TIP that have already advanced to preliminary engineering. So we want to make it clear to you all that if there's a yes in this column, that money, once it's programmed, cannot be returned. Like there's no stopping the project once it moves to that stage. Okay, so the purpose of Table 2, why we have it. Well, first, it's to establish a ranked order of projects based on performance data, and I already kind of explained that to you. Based on the list of project requests we get from the jurisdictions, we evaluate them all and put them in order so that you can see the top ones listed in Table 2 have the greatest impact. And then also, we're ranking the projects because this is the system that the TPO uses to allocate its share of federal funds. So the TPO controls anywhere from, it's actually quite a big window, but anywhere from like 15 to 27-ish $million every year. We prioritize projects up to that amount. And so we base our programming on how these projects rank on Table 2. All right, so some of the projects that we received this year that fall into the state of good repair and resilience category are bus replacements from HART. We get that request every year and we try our best to honor it. So before we even get into programming the rest of the funds that the TPO controls, we usually allocate about $4 million for bus replacements. We also got a request for bus maintenance, midlife overhaul to rehab some of the buses that HART already owns and operates. We got a request for bus stop capital repairs. T-BARDA submitted a request for van pool operational funds, and the city of Tampa submitted a project for Bayshore Boulevard seawall reconstruction. We had quite a few safety projects submitted to us, and we think that this is a reflection of the really poor safety performance we've had over the past few years. So I'm not even exactly sure how many of these are. I haven't counted. I would say upwards of 15, maybe bordering on 20. The ones that we added to the Table 2 include some intersection projects on Hillsborough Ave. These are county projects at Sawyer Road and Town and Country Boulevard, Lois Ave from Cleveland to Boy Scout Boulevard, some intersections along US 301 at Palm River Road, Harney, Stacy, McIntosh, and Sims Road. Mangle Road from MLK to US 92, Lynn Turner Road from Ehrlich to Gunn Highway. That's a collaborative project with TPO and Hillsborough County staff. As is 78th Street from Causeway Boulevard to Palm River, North 15th Street from Fowler to Fletcher, Fletcher Ave from Armenia to Nebraska, CR 39 at Lithia Pinecrest. There's a Complete Street project on Havana from MLK to Hillsborough. I believe that's a city project. Azeel Street, the city of Tampa, by the way. Azeel Street from Dale Mabry to Armenia, Berg Street from Florida to Nebraska, 15th Street from Lake Ave to Palm, Manhattan from Gandy to Euclid, Sheldon from Hillsborough to Waters, and McDill from Bay to Bay to Kennedy. I should have mentioned this before I listed up the projects, but there was actually some change to the way we prioritize safety projects this year. Again, because we've had such a poor crash performance for the past 3 to 5 years, we evaluated these projects first based on construction readiness. So if we received a submission from any of our partners that's shovel ready, those went straight to the top of the Vision Zero list. Some projects that were requesting design and construction fall underneath that, and then making our way down, design, PD&E, planning, and if there was no phase requested, those ended up toward the bottom. Once we sorted based on construction readiness, the second thing we looked at was crash density. So the goal here is to move forward projects that are shovel ready and are located on intersections and corridors that have really poor crash performance. And I think you'll see that we did that when you review Table 2. The third investment program is Smart Cities. The kind of projects that fit into this category are technological or like tech improvements that have an effect to flush traffic on the network, enhance reliability, reduce congestion, just basically make the network operate as it's intended. We received a Smart Cities project from the city of Tampa to replace some of its signals in downtown. A lot of them are 2 times past their useful life. So that project falls at the very top of the Smart Cities program list. There was an intersection project at US 301 and Baum Road, and then some signal replacements on county roads that run through the city of Tampa's jurisdiction. So Cypress at Armenia and Howard, Henderson at San Rafael, Lois, Havana at Columbus, Himes at Gandy, Manhattan at El Prado, Manhattan at Beta Bay, and then Church at Beta Bay. Our Real Choices program is dedicated to multimodal projects, so trails, side paths, enhancements to transit service. Unique this year is that because we received so many safety projects, a lot of them didn't have high enough crash history that they would be able to compete for safety funds. We didn't want to delete those projects, and we wanted to reward them. So instead of putting them in the Vision Zero category, we placed them in Real Choices because we do believe that they'll have benefits to the network by connecting it. A lot of these projects have multimodal enhancements, but they're not necessarily what we would consider safety projects in the way that some of the other Vision Zero projects are. So in addition to the trails and the side paths, you'll see some multimodal safety enhancements on Real Choices this year. And those projects include one at 109th Ave from Nebraska to 30th Street, Ashley Drive from Tyler to Laurel, Dale Mabry at Spruce is an intersection project, Hannah Ave from Nebraska to 40th, 14th Street from Columbus to I-4, Main Street from Armenia to North Boulevard. There's a bike boulevard planned on Gray Street from West Shore to Willow.
Donnie, did we lose you?
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm like,
Yeah.
Hey, Priya, Greg, can either of you guys hear us?
Yes, Johnny, we can't hear you. Johnny, I'm gonna message him personally. Give us a second.
Johnny.
Oh, he's talking. I'm gonna call him.
He's talking now, but.
Yeah, there's kids.
Maybe he has to get on his cell phone.
Yeah.
You just fast forward.
Just reading all these. Such a distress.
Yeah.
He's looking at his phone.
We can all,
Should we
we
chat?
can all do this.
Oh, yeah, maybe you think teams would chat. Seemed really well behaved and not having his phone. Yeah.
I think my brain, you probably don't see wait my God, man.
Yeah, true.
And you always one screen at home.
Right.
Unless you text them rather than call and say.
Stop talking. Or we can all raise our hands.
You can try that. I've messaged him in Teams.
Oh, he's.
Maybe now.
Come on, Johnny, you can talk.
He stopped talking.
He's probably, how long has this been going on?
Johnny,
Oh,
can you hear us?
slides.
Can you hear Johnny?
Johnny, can you give us a sign if you can hear us?
Oh, look, he's putting his earbuds in.
Earbuds.
Okay.
Johnny, can you hear us now?
We're trying to.
We cannot hear you still.
Well, at least he stopped talking. Oh, he's practicing.
Not yet.
Chair, now might be a good time. I do have a couple of members who have tuned in virtually. I have Robert Frey and Anna has person 2. So if you would like, I'd like to call for a consent of remote participation, please, from the members present.
So we have to do a motion for that?
Yes, please.
So moved. We got a motion from Mark,
Jake Holland, second.
motion to second. Any discussion? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think they're still working with John. I think Gina finally got him on the phone.
I mean, you can talk and I can say your word, but I don't know.
Can you just hold your contact microphone?
Yeah, maybe. Okay, let's try this. This is like old school. Hold on a second. Okay. Wait a minute. Let's try that. Go ahead. Yeah. Okay.
Is that mic on?
It is.
Yeah, it is.
Why do we do it loud? I mean, we can hear you in the room. I don't know about virtually. It's kind of weird that it's not loud. But go ahead. I think
It's very faint to those of us online. It is very faint to those of us online.
faint.
Yeah.
Is that what you said?
Can you check for the bottom?
Okay. Take it. Is your volume all the way up on your phone? No. It's not up at all. So Johnny. Oh, yeah. Takes a phone. I don't think so. Just say something.
Is Priya running the PowerPoint, or is Johnny? Because Johnny could actually have somebody else. Yeah.
It's Johnny who's sharing this presentation.
Because can't he actually call into the meeting on his cell phone? Because he called you on his cell phone, didn't he?
Yeah, call. Right. I don't know what that number is. But hey.
So, yeah, so he can call into the meeting and that should actually work.
Should I see if our tech has the openings for the judges?
Because when this doesn't work, everybody will go, CJ, we told you.
Yeah, that's right.
We had him whispering into the microphone up there.
If Johnny could rejoin the meeting or toggle between the mic and the speaker input, I think it's gonna work. So I messaged him personally. Let's see if we can try that and see the audio should be resolved.
Can you hear me at all?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, not ideal, but we'll make it work. So the audio cut out around real choices.
Yes.
Like Gray Street, I think you got that.
Yeah, you're about mid-slide. It's a,
Okay. Okay. Well, I was only providing slightly more detail than what you see on the slide, but as I was saying, there's a bike boulevard project on Gray Street from West Shore to Willow, an intersection project at Armenia in Barclay, green artery segments D and E are trail projects. There's a safety project at Waters and Florida Mining Boulevard. Brush Street from Whiting to Kennedy is part of the Water Street development. Another intersection project from Mango Road, or I should say at Mango Road and Old Hillsborough Ave. And then we opened a line item at the bottom of Real Choices for a DLT project. They're doing a sidewalk gap inventory on their network. They haven't produced a final list of the locations to fill in. So we're just leaving that line item open for them in case they come up with funding later. They won't have to go through a TIP amendment to spend that money. All right, and then lastly is major projects for economic growth. These are mostly capacity addition projects like network extensions, fixed guideway transit, otherwise just projects that are prohibitively expensive. So as I mentioned earlier, the TPO only controls between like 15 to 27 mil a year, and it would be very difficult for us to program funds for projects in this category, but we leave them on the tip in case the agencies are seeking funds from another source. They can still point to the tip and say that there's plenty of consistency. So the new major projects that we added this year is a bridge rehab project for Bro Rain Street. This is actually phase 1 of 2. Cass Street bridge repair, Cross Bay ferry service, 30th Street from Yukon to Fowler is a pretty big safety project. And there's also a big safety project at Interbay Boulevard from West Shore to Bay Shore. The last table to review is table 3. And again, this is predominantly composed of projects from the DOT not tentative anymore, the DOT work program, as well as the capital improvements programs from the local governments. We briefly summarized some of the projects and broke them out by category. There are hundreds of projects in here, so we can't spend time going through each and every one of them, but just as a quick reference, there are 78 state of good repair or resiliency oriented projects, 26 safety projects, 17 smart city, 7 real choices when not driving, 30 major projects, and 35 miscellaneous. Miscellaneous is like a catch-all within a catch-all. A lot of the projects that fall into that category are like landscaping, herbicide applications, things like that. They're loosely related to transportation, but they're not what I would consider transportation projects. This slide is showing the allocation of funds by project type. This isn't just TPO funds. These are all transportation funds that are being allocated to projects over the next 5 years. In total, it's somewhere around $4 billion. Important to note that the TPO controls less than 2% of the total amount spent. But you'll see that of all the transportation funds spent in the county, 48% of them are on major projects, followed by 20% for state of good repair and resilience, and then miscellaneous, real choices when not driving, and then smart cities and Vision Zero account for about 2% of the total. That's a fraction of, or I should say, the TPO controls a fraction of the funding that's actually needed. You all may recall that when we did the long-range transportation plan a few years back, we produced a needs assessment showing what the needs are in the county and how much money it would take to achieve that. The TPO controls such a small fraction that we're really supplementing what amount of funds the local governments and DOT are contributing. The next steps for moving the TIP forward, we're actually getting very close to the end. We have coordinated with our partners both within the county and regionally. We worked with all of the MPOs and TPOs around West Central Florida to produce a list of transportation regional incentive program priorities and regional multi-use trail priorities. Both of those lists are going to be presented to the Suncoast Transportation Planning Alliance later this week, or I'm sorry, next week. The reason why it's important TIP is there has to be planning consistency. So for any of those regional projects to move forward, they need to be adopted into each TPO's TIP.
If you would still answer
All the projects face out again.
Yeah, Johnny, you did go out again, but we got you.
You're back now.
You're back.
Okay. I was saying that tables 1 and 2 and all the projects in them have been evaluated by
It's because he was listening. Yeah.
He may need to turn his camera off. I wonder if he's eating up all the bandwidth, especially if he's got his cell phone running off of his Wi-Fi as well.
Right. CJ, tech. Okay.
He's too
Right, I agree. I'm gonna tell Lionel. Sorry, guys, you should recruit.
Give up a community planning gig.
Sorry, planning. You guys, how about the resilient? Type in our questions. Okay, Johnny.
Very good.
Hi,
Hey,
this
John,
is
am I back?
Connor.
Yeah, you're back.
Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry about that. All right. So anyway,
anyway.
So do you guys have questions for him? Maybe we can just,
Well, I don't know, here, that's the problem.
I know. it's fucking-
Gina, we do have Connor and Vishaka on the line as well.
Yes, this is Connor. I just asked Johnny if he'd like me to continue the presentation. I just want to get it pulled up. It looks like he was presenting. He had presenter mode.
I know that I've seen this presentation several times and I think there's only like, well, there's probably one more slide.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Connor, you are the presenter now. This is Priya.
Well, so maybe we should go to questions. I don't know if Johnny can hear or if somebody else can answer these, but are there any questions from?
Gina, can you hear me?
Yes. Any questions on the tip and what Johnny presented today from the committee? Don't everybody speak at once.
Gina, can you hear me?
Yes, yeah, we can hear you, Johnny, and I'm pretty sure you were to the end of the presentation. We're asking if there were any questions from the members. I don't think.
Yeah, you're right. I am at the end. I think I figured out what the issue is with the mic. Very convenient, but yeah, I am almost done. So I can't really see what slide is pulled up, but I wanted to share a list of the regional projects that we've coordinated already. The only trip project from the county or within the county is from Hillsborough County. That's Big Bend Road. The bookends from US 41 to Covington Garden Drive, and then Simmons Loop to US 301. There are a number of multi-use regional trail projects, pretty much all of them. South Coast Greenway, Upper Tampa Bay, Tampa Bypass, Admiral Drive, South Tampa Greenway, Howard Franklin, Gandy Bridge, and then Dale Mabry Overpass. We've made this presentation to just about all of the committees. TAC is the last one. We presented it to Livable Roadways and BPAC. They both recommended approval. We presented it to the CAC last Wednesday, and they also recommended approval. So I'm going to turn it over to you. But before I do that, I will say the public hearing is on June 8th. That's this Wednesday, beginning at 6 p.m. and it's going to be virtual. So if anyone would like to attend in person, it'll be on the second floor of County Center, and we have an option for you all to dial in virtually. Next slide, please. The recommended action that we're presenting to you all is to approve the TIP update for fiscal year 22-23 through 26-27, and to approve TIP priority list, which is table 2. And now I'll open it up to questions and discussion, which is the next slide, please.
Okay, now do we have any questions from the committee members? Okay, Jay has a question. Go ahead, Jay.
Hey, Johnny, Connor, and Vishaka, maybe on 2022 priority number 71 on table 2, which is the Dale Mabry pedestrian overpass. Under the progress status request, it says 2030 at the end of it. So am I to understand then that that pedestrian overpass is to be completed around 2030?
Hi, Jay. This is Wade Reynolds on
Jay,
the
can you
line.
tell me what page of the TIP document that's?
Hey, Johnny. Wade's really familiar with that project. He's jumping in. So you can, let's let Wade see what Wade was going to say.
Sure. That's being
perfect.
included with the adjacent segment of the West Shore Interchange project as it continues into downtown Tampa and meets up with the downtown interchange. That is programmed for 2029, which should put it complete in 2030. You're correct.
Okay, all right, thanks, Wade. And Wade, to your knowledge for the MPO, that is our only pedestrian overpass associated with the trail connection along the interstate, right?
Unless you include the Big Bend overpass, which is near I-75 in South County.
Tough bike ride from Tampa, but still, we'll try it one day.
All right, thanks.
Appreciate it.
Any other questions from the committee? or anyone online, actually. I know Bob's online. Anna, yes. Okay, hearing none. Do we have a motion?
So this is Jay Collins. I'll make a motion to approve the TIP 2022-23 to 26-27 in the TIP priority list table 2.
Okay, second.
Second.
Mark and Melanie both seconded. Any other discussion before we vote? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries unanimously.
All right, thank you all. Thanks for bearing with me through the issues.
Thanks, Johnny. Next up is Hillsborough County Corridor Planning and Preservation Best Practice Study. Sarah, I think you had it there, that you may have somebody helping you with that.
Yes, we do. So Richard Rank is online, and Christine Williams, I believe, is too. Christine is from Cutter. Cutter helped us with this best practices study, and so I'll turn it over to Richard and Christine.
Okay.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, Richard.
Yay. All right. My name is Richard Rank with the Community and Infrastructure Planning Group, working with Sarah Caper, and we have started an update to the multimodal corridor preservation plan. But before that, we wanted to kind of get an understanding of what other places, other municipalities, and what they're doing as part of their corridor plan. So we initiated a corridor planning and preservation best practices study. The purpose of that study was to provide insight and guidance on the current state of practice in Florida, best practices within the state, and also best practices nationally. So we requested Christine Williams and Cutter, the Center for Urban Transportation Research at USF, to conduct this study. Christine Williams, she directs the Planning and Corridor Management Program at Cutter. She's a multimodal planning specialist, transportation and land use policy analyst, and National Authority on Access Management. So with that, I believe Christine is on the line and she can take over the presentation. And thank you for having us on at the TAC.
Thanks, Richard.
Okay, can everyone hear me well?
Yes.
Yes.
Great, and are you seeing the full slide view or the notes view? Looks like the full slide.
Yes, the full slide view.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, yeah, so thank you, Richard, for the intro. And I'm not going to show myself for fear of losing you. So he mentioned the objectives, and so basically to look around and find out what everyone was doing around the country, and to give some guidance on to the county as it proceeds to update the corridor plan, and particularly looking at the law and multimodal practices. And so kind of a broad brush summary of the findings, and it is a lengthy report. We do have it online, and there's a link somewhere in here that I can share with you to that report. But we did, Florida's long had a really strong legal context for corridor preservation and management in the law, in the planning laws, and with the addition of the multimodal issues with Chapter 163 amendments several years ago, that's further strengthened, I think. So as long as an agency is proceeding with careful attention to those statutory requirements, and some of the legal tests like that dual rational nexus test, rough proportionality that you've probably heard about, you're on really strong legal footing to manage that right of way. It helps to have a really good plan and vision as well, I think, and make sure everything's consistent internally. And we did find that, you know, the contemporary plans are increasingly context sensitive, and that follows national best practice. And they're emphasizing a more multimodal or complete streets approach, and even the use of grid networks for placemaking in some of those compact area types. We didn't really find much in terms of the emerging technology and resiliency, other than there are some issues in terms of network redundancy and connectivity in your system that will give you some resiliency, certainly, as well as relief from congestion and some placemaking benefits. And in terms of technology, we can touch on that briefly. So I have 4 key areas that we organize the findings around according to these topics that you see on the screen. So I'll just run through those briefly. Kind of starting with the whole multimodal and context sensitive, I thought Fort Worth was a really good example, completely grounded in a complete streets philosophy. And they have context sensitive road classifications rather than area types per se. It's a little different from that perspective, and I'll show you what I mean here in a minute. And also some strong procedures for flexibility. And just for clarification, this and many of, just like Hillsborough's plan and many of the plans around the country are regulatory plans. So they do have regulatory import. They're not simply long-range visions. Obviously you can't read all of this, but I just wanted to mention the street type descriptions because built into those are area types. So you have things like the activity streets, which are more pedestrian streets, or your commerce mixed-use streets, which is something like a downtown grid network. The commercial connectors were more commercial strip types. So each of these has some design characteristics and modal characteristics built into the description, and then there's some special types too that they have, like roundabout corridors. So when they put together their corridor plan, they're walking through all of the existing plans and maps that they have. And they start with the street type. Which of these 5 street types that I just showed you is this corridor that we're looking at? How many lanes in each direction? What do the transit plans say about the transit facilities? Is it a dedicated transit lane, for example? Is the transit in the median? So that determines the design, the cross-section type, and how much right-of-way. The median type, again, and they had some other criteria that they were going to consider in terms of the type of median that they were going to incorporate, the type of parking, and the type of bicycle facility. Is it shared on street, a separate bike facility, and so forth. And then just a variety of other criteria that they consider. Technically, what is the volume of the street? What's the target speed? Do we want to slow it down? And that sort of thing in terms of the right-of-way width. And all of this kind of feeds into a coding system where they go through each of these different types of codes based on those criteria to think about what is the amount of right-of-way that we'll need in width. And then that's accompanied by a certain amount of a description of the type of facility that they're looking at. And then, so every few years, this plan gets updated. And also, the flexibility is built in the availability of amendments. The administration, they can either be done on an administrative level or by the commission. And they also have waivers, some interim cross sections if the different the available right-of-way width isn't sufficient at a given point. So they'll build to that point with reduction options, median upgrades, and street type exceptions for special districts in certain areas. So there's a lot of flexibility built into the process, which is really great as well. So that's for Fort Worth. Now, if you think about a different, here's another example. I mean, Indianapolis, Marion County, a system-wide thoroughfare plan adopted as part of the transportation element. Again, a complete streets approach. And here they were, they had their typical functional class, but they did have area type, 2 area types that they applied. And I'll show you a map of those. And then for these various areas, they had the right-of-way standards and guidelines adopted that, again, waivers were provided for, and some general prototypical cross-section types. So here you can see the area type and context map. So they had compact context areas and metro context areas, and that was it. So pretty simple approach there. And then they're tied to the right-of-way standards. Well, here's the functional class example of that. And again, these are the standard functional classes you typically see. And then they had the right-of-way standards and design guidelines table that gives you information on the standard right-of-way needs based on these area types and classifications. And so you see here arterial, you know, how many lanes in each direction. They've got a minimum and maximum right of way and some speed, and then some various criteria that they designate for their prototypical cross sections based on whatever their modal priorities are in that given area. And Broward County, they've had that traffic ways plan, I think since the 60s, it was adopted to identify their right-of-way needs. And then since the MPO adopted the Complete Streets Guidelines, they've also provided for the adoption of context-sensitive corridors. And so a local agency in Broward County, which is governed by Countywide Planning Council, can petition then the commission for a context-sensitive corridor, and they have these different types: urban core, urban main street, or urban residential, and all of them are tied to some specific plans. This one is City of Pompano Beach that proposed this one. So you can see how there's variations in practice, but there's some certain themes that you're seeing over and over again. I incorporated this because some of the cities in Texas have been doing this thoroughfare planning for some time, and they do it in a very detailed manner to the point of really integrating this with their land use regulations. And this is an example of that in this city that's really trying to do more of a compact urban form approach by establishing a street grid as a framework for growth. And it was interesting to me that the driver for this was flood mitigation and resilience, trying to get more of the growth in the areas where they could accommodate that growth and less of it into the areas that were experiencing more flooding and wildfires. But I thought this is a neat idea for, like in Hillsborough County, there's so many community plans for some of those communities that really want to establish some placemaking in an urban core kind of environment in certain parts of their community. And we did see that in the South County study, that many of them had community plans that had town center concepts. Perhaps not to this level of a grid, but a grid concept could be somewhat integrated into those plans. And the other thing that creates resilience, which I mentioned earlier, is that redundancy in the network. And so as the county moves forward in thinking about how are we going to build our future corridor network, I thought this right sizing guide was an interesting example that just came out of NCHRP not too long ago. And it's based on this idea that the regularly spaced thoroughfares you're going to be able to get smaller cross sections and more redundancy in the network that creates that resiliency. To move toward a more robust network spacing, taking these basic grid concepts, looking at what that would be if you actually could just, do that everywhere, which obviously you can't. There's a variety of constraints. Comparing it against the existing thoroughfare network, and then looking at where might be some of our opportunities to build a stronger gridded network of thoroughfares, and then building that out into a priority network. So that would be an interesting example to consider as well, to the extent that the county could accomplish some of that over time. Indian River County has a gridded network. It's been building on for many, many years, as well as a subdivision collector map, which is unusual. You don't usually see it to that extent. And that really does help them very much in terms of their transit system, they mentioned. And it extends out into the other jurisdictions, surrounding jurisdictions as well, because they're starting to get an increase in low density non-urban uses, well, outside of their urban service area, put it that way. And but some of the Texas counties were actually extending it beyond their own jurisdictional boundaries. And they also have minimum right-of-way standards, and they're trying to purchase right-of-way. The county asks us to think about also the emerging technology, and certainly there's a number of studies underway on how do you classify the roadway network for automated and connected vehicles. So one suggestion is to start, as the county continues and the region continues to look at these issues, where are these networks going to be, to start to designate those on the corridor plan and consider those both for overall management, but also are there additional right-of-way needs to incorporate this new technology, and if so, make that a part of the whole right-of-way management process. We didn't find any examples of that, but it certainly seems to be the next logical step with some of these smart corridors and all the connected and automated studies going on in our region on THEA, and what can we do to really make sure that the overall system is managed to support that. And then the Florida DOT obviously has an electric vehicle master plan. And so the county could also consider what are some areas where we might want to further electrify the grid, make sure that we have electric charging stations available. And are there any right-of-way implications of any of this? Are there corridors where we may want to, as a public entity, further that cause by providing additional land for the integration of those EV charging stations? And resiliency, so the studies of like the Resilient Tampa Bay pilot program, looking at what are the high vulnerability corridors and prioritizing those in terms of future investment and changes that are necessary to accommodate some of the mitigation strategies that might be needed, and does that require additional right-of-way, and if so, to again incorporate that into the long-range corridor planning activities as part of the right-of-way management. And I mentioned network redundancy, not only in terms of the gridded networks that we talked about earlier, but also parallel relievers, and that connections to alternatives to allow individuals to circulate if there's an event of an incident or some need for evacuation. So that's a kind of in sum of the recommendations. I went through very quickly, but you can certainly take a look at the report on your leisure. And here's a link to it. I'm not sure that link got into your notes on the presentation. Hopefully in the recording you can see it, or you could make a note. It's online.flippingbook.com/viewview. 60 and this number 603-887-813. But having that overall vision with flexibility and supporting technical documentation and building in the classification by function, area type or context, and mode really creates a strong framework for that complete streets approach. Think about the idealized grid and where we need more network. And it seems counterintuitive, but that actually benefits the environment and benefits placemaking options as well. And think about how are we going to integrate technology and resiliency into our system as we build, and some sort of, which I didn't touch on yet, a dedicated funding source, obviously, for corridor management projects and the acquisition of right-of-way to keep the costs down over time, so you're not having to pay for right-of-way after it's already been improved. So that's really the quick overview of my study. And I do hope you get a chance to look at it. I'm going to turn it now to Richard to talk about next steps, and I guess then we'll answer any questions at that time.
All right. Thank you. I guess you'll have to flip it. Thank you. Again, Richard Rank from Community Infrastructure Planning. With this, we hope to move forward on the actual update to the corridor preservation plan. Next slide, please. So we want to start with, what we know in the mobility element, and that's, building and maintaining a transportation system that supports the needs of all users. So we're not just talking cars anymore. We're talking, pedestrians, we're talking cyclists, multimodal, transit, all of that will be considered as part of the corridor preservation plan. Next slide, please. So there's several elements that are working together, and we've been championing the context-based classification system, from which we looked at livable communities in our future land use map and existing policies to create a context-based classification system that will help guide us through this corridor preservation plan update. A lot of this was kind of part of the best practices. It's a summary of the process of implementing the vision, identifying the transportation network, which is the process. That's where we're at right now at the very beginning of this effort. We'll come back to you when we have a better understanding of what we have and where we want to go with the corridor preservation plan. We'll analyze and identify grid opportunities to include other concepts such as shared use paths. We're developing scenarios right now, and part of that scenario building will look at new technology and how that might be applied to our classification, our context classification and functional classification system. We'll hope to optimize network redundancy, focusing on vulnerable routes, and finally analyze and identify methods and procedures to manage the projects and set aside, as we did with the existing corridor preservation plan, set aside right-of-way as part of the development review process. Like I said, here's the schedule. So we're early on in the process right now. We hope to get this project done at the end of, well, actually in the second quarter of next year. So in about a year from now, or a little less than a year from now. But we'll have stakeholder meetings and focus group meetings along the way. We'll be coming back to the TPO committees to let them know where we are. So like I said, we're just in the data gathering stages right now and starting to develop our scenarios. So stay tuned for more. To go back to what Christine was saying about the existing Cutter presentation and the Cutter best practices guide. I put in the chat room a link to that flip book, so the report is available there. With that, if you have any questions, I'm here and Christine's here.
Okay, thank you, Richard and Christine. Any questions from the members? Everybody's very quiet.
Very thorough presentation.
Yes,
I have a question. I just, you know, thinking about this, looking at this future, of course, not our existing context, but like we have so many people moving here over the next 20, or almost at 2 million already. So the context of what we see now is not necessarily what we'll see on that particular roadway. So I know that that's definitely, you guys have already taken that into account. And like my dream is both a Vision Zero advocate and moving traffic is to see more 4-lane undivided than an 8-lane undivided. You know, like I hope that we have opportunities to find that kind of option than, you know, widening to 6 and 8 lanes, because that isn't the safest place. So just, I mean, those are just things in my head, but I mean, this is it's early on here and this is going to be fun. I'm on the stakeholder team, so I'm looking forward to watching the process move forward.
Yep, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Okay, thank you, Sarah, Richard, Christine, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is Tampa Vision Zero implementation through maintenance. And this is Cal Harding. Cal, are you online or anybody else from the city?
Should be, I reminded him today.
I do not see him online.
I know, sure.
Well, in that case, Melanie has to give the presentation.
Well, that was going to be interesting. I was really looking forward to that. Yeah. Well, I'm bummed, but I'm sure it'll be really interesting to hear how the city is moving.
Yeah, maybe next time we can. Okay. And old business and new business, I guess one thing I would mention under that is this committee is in recess next month. So there is no meeting scheduled for July. That's pretty stark tradition for a while.
Right.
So if you show up next month, you'll be by yourself, I guess. Any other old or new business from the members? I think we're adjourned then, unless there's anything else. All right, thank you, everybody.
Can you even help write the write-up for the item? But you're like, yeah, I'm going to go to the theater tomorrow night, and then I don't know, she's like, she did the DOT commissioner.